The morning started like any other in the quiet neighborhood of Crescent Hill. Birds picking through dry grass, a dog barking 2 streets over, the distant sound of a garbage truck making its rounds. Then a black SUV turned onto Maple Grove Lane. It was not the kind of car that belonged on that street. The kind of street where people parked rusted Corollas half on the sidewalk and patched their screen doors with duct tape. The SUV moved slowly, like the driver was reading numbers off mailboxes. It stopped in front of a small beige house with a cracked front step and a rosebush that had not been watered in weeks. 2 men in dark suits stepped out. A neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, paused her sweeping and watched from across the street. Another woman looked through her blinds without moving the curtain. One of the men knocked on the door, then knocked again. "Is this the home of a woman named Zola?" he asked when a teenager from next door came out to stare. The boy nodded slowly. "She's at work." The man in the suit looked at the other man. Then he looked back at the house. "We'll wait," he said. Zola Bridges had been working the early shift at Meadowbrook Senior Care for going on 3 years. She was 26, and she had the kind of face that made elderly residents trust her immediately. Open, unhurried, with eyes that paid attention. She was not a nurse. She was a certified nursing assistant, which meant she was the one who did the work that nobody photographed or put in the brochure bathing residents, helping them to the bathroom, sitting with them when they couldn't sleep, and the hallways were quiet, and the fear crept in. She made $14.20 an hour. Her supervisor was a woman named Director Pauline Marsh, who ran Meadowbrook the way a person runs a budget airline, always cutting, always watching the numbers, always looking for something to report. She had a specific way of standing in doorways with her clipboard that made staff nervous, even when they hadn't done anything wrong. Most of the aides kept their heads down around Pauline. Zola did too, mostly. But Zola had a soft spot she could not always hide. It started with Mr. Calvin Osey. He had arrived at Meadowbrook 6 weeks before, placed there by paperwork and a distant nephew who visited once, signed something, and disappeared. Mr. Osey was 74. He walked slowly with a slight lean to the left, wore the same brown cardigan most days, and ate very little of what the facility kitchen served him. Not because the food was terrible, though it was, but because he ate alone, and eating alone has a way of stealing appetite. The first time Zola noticed him, he was sitting in the common room while a game show played on the television. Everyone else was watching. Mr. Osey was looking out the window, just looking. His tray of food was untouched beside him. Zola set down the linen cart and walked over. "Mr. Osey," she said gently, "you haven't touched your dinner." He looked at her. His eyes were calm, careful, the eyes of a man who had learned not to expect much. "I'm not hungry," he said. Zola looked at the tray, watery mashed potatoes, a thin slice of turkey that had clearly been reheated, a cup of canned peaches. She understood. "Okay," she said. She did not push. She just pulled the chair beside him and sat for a moment, not saying anything. Then she said, "That rosebush out there needs some attention." He looked at the window again. A faint smile moved across his face. "My late wife had a garden," he said. "Roses, mostly. That was the beginning. After that, Zola started bringing Mr. Osey something from outside whenever she could manage it. Nothing expensive. A piece of fruit from the corner store. A small container of jollof rice from the Caribbean spot 2 blocks from her apartment. A homemade biscuit wrapped in foil that she'd gotten up early to make because she remembered he mentioned once that his mother used to make them. She paid for these things out of her own pocket. She did not tell anyone. She brought them during her break, slipping into his room quietly, setting the food on his nightstand, and leaving before he could protest. He always protested anyway. "You don't have to do this," he would say. "I know," she would say. "I'm not your responsibility. I know that too." He would shake his head. She would leave. He would eat every bite. It went on like this for weeks. Zola noticed he was getting a little stronger. He started finishing his dinner tray more. He started speaking to the resident down the hall, a woman named Miss Ruth, who laughed loudly at nothing in particular and had a good effect on the people around her. Some color came back into Mr. Osey's face. He started wearing a different cardigan on Tuesdays. Zola noticed all of it. She did not say anything about it to him, she just kept showing up. What she did not know was that someone else was noticing too. Her coworker Denise had been at Meadowbrook for 7 years. She was good at her job, fast and efficient, and she had a reputation as the aide director Pauline trusted most. They had a particular relationship. Denise would mention things she observed, and Pauline would take note. Some people called it professionalism. Some people called it something else. Denise had seen Zola bring food to Mr. O.C. twice. She had not said anything yet. She was waiting. The third time, she watched from just outside the doorway. She saw Zola set a small brown paper bag on the nightstand. She saw Mr. O.C. look at it. She saw him say something quiet and Zola smile and wave her hand like it was nothing. Denise pulled out her phone and took a photo. She did not bring it to Pauline immediately. She kept it, filed it away, like something she might need later. The next week, Zola was late coming back from her lunch break. 4 minutes. She had walked farther than usual because the good fruit stand was closed and she had to go an extra block to find strawberries. Because Mr. O.C. had mentioned once, just once, briefly, that he used to pick strawberries as a child in Ghana. Director Pauline was standing at the nurse's station when Zola came back through the side door. "You're late," Pauline said. "I know, I'm sorry. 4 minutes. Zola stopped. "Yes, ma'am. It won't happen again." Pauline looked at her for a long moment, the clipboard resting against her forearm. "Where were you?" "Just out for lunch." Pauline glanced toward the hallway, then back at Zola. "Room 14 needed to be turned at 12:15. It was 12:19 when you got there." Zola said nothing. She had turned Mr. Hendricks at 12:19. She had documented it. It was 4 minutes late. "Do better," Pauline said, and walked away. Zola stood there for a second. Then she picked up her clipboard and kept moving. That evening she sat on her apartment floor eating cereal because she hadn't had time to cook, and she thought about the strawberries she'd brought Mr. O.C. She thought about the way his face had changed when he opened the bag. Not dramatically, not with tears, just a small, quiet change in the eyes, like a window being cracked open. She finished her cereal. She went to bed. She did not stop bringing him things. It was on a Thursday 3 weeks later when everything changed. Denise went to Pauline's office during the morning meeting, when she knew Zola would be occupied on the far wing. She knocked twice and went in. She set her phone on the desk and showed Pauline the photo. Pauline looked at it. Then she looked at Denise. "How long has this been going on?" she asked. "Weeks," Denise said, "every few days." Pauline was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You know we have strict policies about outside food. Health codes, liability." "I know," Denise said. Pauline looked at the photo again. "Find out if there have been other instances." Denise nodded and left. Zola did not find out about the conversation until 2 days later when Pauline called her into the office and asked her to sit down. The chair across from Pauline's desk was hard and placed at a slight angle, the kind of positioning that was probably not accidental. Pauline had the photo pulled up on her computer. She turned the screen toward Zola. Zola looked at it. Her face did not change right away. She recognized the nightstand, the brown bag. The angle of the photo told her it had been taken from the doorway. "Can you tell me what this is?" Pauline asked. Zola looked at her. "I brought him food from outside. Strawberries. He mentioned once that." "I'm not asking for the story behind it," Pauline said. "I'm asking if you understand why this is a problem." Zola was quiet. "Outside food is not permitted. Health code. Liability. You know this." "Yes," Zola said. "I know, and yet you did it anyway. Multiple times." "He wasn't eating," Zola said. Her voice was steady, but there was something underneath it. "The facility food. He couldn't get through it. He was losing weight. I was worried about him." Pauline folded her hands. "Zola, your job is to provide care within the scope of your role. It is not to make unilateral decisions about residents' nutrition." Zola looked at her. She did not say what she was thinking. "I'm going to have to write this up," Pauline said. "Given your record and the repeated nature of this, I'm also placing you on a 1-week unpaid suspension, effective tomorrow. If something like this happens again, we'll have to let you go." The room was very quiet. "Do you have any questions?" Pauline asked. Zola shook her head. "You can go." She stood up. She smoothed the front of her scrubs. She walked out of the office and down the hallway, past the nurse's station, past room 14, past room 8, all the way to the supply closet at the end of the east wing. She went inside and stood in the dark between the and pressed the back of her hand against her mouth. She did not cry. She stood there for a while. Then she straightened up, turned the light on, grabbed the linen cart, and went back to work. She had 1 more hour on her shift. She was going to finish it. The suspension meant a week without pay. Zola did the math quickly, and the math was not kind. She had rent on the 1st. She had a car insurance payment on the 15th. She had $47 in checking, and about the same in her savings, which she had been adding to slowly $20 or $30 at a time, trying to reach enough to take a CNA to LPN bridge course that would move her up to licensed practical nurse. The course cost $800. She had been saving for 4 months. She went home that Friday afternoon and sat at the kitchen table and looked at the number on her savings app. She thought about what she had spent on Mr. Osi over the past few weeks. Fruit, rice, biscuits, strawberries, small things, $10 here, $7 there, but it added up. She was not angry about it. That was the strange thing. She sat there looking at the number, and she was not angry. She was tired, but not angry. She thought about calling her cousin Layla, who always had opinions and gave them freely. She thought about calling her mother in Savannah, who would worry and then pray loudly on the phone. She decided not to call anyone. She made herself a cup of tea and stood at the kitchen window and watched the neighbor's kid ride a bicycle in small circles at the end of the driveway. She thought about Mr. Osi's face when she'd brought the strawberries. She went to bed. The next morning, even though she was suspended and had nowhere to be, she woke up at the same time she always did, 5:40. Her body did not know how to sleep in. She lay there for a while, looking at the ceiling, listening to the apartment settle around her. She got up, made coffee, put on her shoes. She drove to the grocery store, not the expensive one, the one on Fletcher that smelled like floor wax and had good prices on produce. She bought a small thing of grapes and a container of jerk chicken from the hot deli counter, because she remembered that Mr. Osi had mentioned, months ago, that he had lived in Brooklyn for 12 years before moving south, and there was a Jamaican place on Flatbush he used to go to every Sunday. She could not bring it to him. She was suspended. She was not allowed on the premises. She sat in the parking lot for a while holding the bag. Then she drove home and ate the jerk chicken herself and left the grapes on the counter and felt foolish. She spent the week applying for other positions, just in case. She did not want to leave Meadowbrook. She was good at her job and she knew the residents, and she had spent 3 years learning all the small things. Who liked their blanket folded a specific way, who needed the TV volume at 14 and not 15, who did not like to be touched on the left shoulder. All of that would have to start over somewhere else. She went back after the suspension. She kept her head down. She did not bring any more food to Mr. Osi, though she still stopped in to check on him, still sat for a few minutes when she could. He did not ask about the food. He seemed to understand that something had changed. One afternoon he looked at her with those careful eyes and said, "You got in trouble, didn't you?" It was not a question. "Don't worry about that," she said. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You know, I used to run a business for many years. And the hardest thing was always knowing who had a good heart. People can say the right things, but the heart, that is something different." Zola looked at him. "You should be resting." "I'm always resting," he said. "I'm 74 years old. I rest too much." She laughed a little. He smiled. "Thank you," he said, "for what you did. All of it." "It was nothing," she said. He shook his head slowly. "No," he said. "It was not nothing." 3 weeks after her suspension ended, Zola came in for her Tuesday shift and Mr. Osi's room was empty. She stood in the doorway for a moment. The bed was made. The nightstand was cleared. The brown cardigan was gone. She went to the nurse's station and asked quietly. "He was discharged," the charge nurse said. "Family came for him over the weekend." "His family?" Zola said. "He didn't have. I thought his nephew was the only, a son, I think. Or a nephew, someone came. Signed the paperwork, he's gone." Zola stood there for a moment, then she nodded and went to clock in. She told herself it was good he was with family, that was better than being here. But something in her chest sat quietly wrong for the rest of the week. She had not said goodbye. She had not gotten to say goodbye. It was a Tuesday morning, 5 weeks later, when she came home from a night shift and found her neighbor Mrs. Patterson on the front walk looking agitated. "Zola," Mrs. Patterson said, "there were 2 men here, in suits. They knocked on your door and they waited for a while and then they left." Zola blinked. "What men?" "Suits," Mrs. Patterson said again, as if that answered it. "Very nice car." Zola went inside. She took off her shoes. She set down her bag. She made herself not think about it too hard, because she was tired and had learned not to borrow trouble. Her phone rang an hour later. Unknown number. She almost did not answer. She answered. "Is this Zola Bridges?" The voice was professional, measured. "Yes, Ems Bridges. My name is Marcus Webb. I'm calling on behalf of OC Group International. Our director has asked me to reach out to you regarding a matter of personal importance to him. He would like to invite you to meet with him at your earliest convenience. He wanted me to assure you that you are not in any kind of trouble. He simply wishes to thank you in person." Zola sat down on the edge of her bed. "Ozai," she said slowly. "Yes, ma'am. Mr. Emmanuel Ozai." The room was very quiet. "He was at Meadowbrook," she said. "Yes, ma'am." She looked at the wall in front of her. She thought about the brown cardigan, the untouched dinner tray, the way he had looked out the window at the rose bush that needed water. "Okay," she said finally. "Okay, I'll meet with him." They sent a car. It was not the black SUV from the first time. This one was gray and long and so clean it looked like it had never been outside. A man named Thomas opened the door for her, and she sat in the back and watched Crescent Hill disappear behind her and tried to keep her hands still in her lap. The drive was long, over 2 hours. The city gave way to wide roads, and then a gated property she would not have known existed. Thomas spoke into a small device at the entrance, and the gate rolled open. The house was not what she expected, though she was not sure what she had expected. It was large, but not showy stone. Old trees. A garden on the south side with roses that looked like they had been cared for a long time. A woman named Christine met her at the door and brought her through a wide hallway into a sitting room with windows on 3 sides. Mr. Osei was standing when she came in. He was wearing a dark suit. His posture was different. Not the careful lean she remembered, but straight, deliberate. He looked the same in the eyes, exactly the same. "Zola," he said. She almost said his name back, then she stopped herself. "Mr. Osei," she said. He gestured toward the sitting area. "Please sit. I owe you an explanation and I want to give it properly." She sat. He sat across from her. Christine set a tray of tea down and left the room. "I wasn't entirely honest with you," he began. "When I was at Meadowbrook, I was honest in every moment, in every conversation. But there was something I did not tell you." Zola looked at him. "My placement at Meadowbrook was temporary, intentional." He folded his hands in his lap. "I'm the founder of OC Group. We have operations in 7 countries. I stepped back from the executive role 2 years ago when my health required it, but I remain involved in a significant way. One of our divisions is evaluating the acquisition of a senior care company. Several facilities in this region. Meadowbrook is among them." Zola was very still. "I placed myself in 3 different facilities over a period of 4 months," he said. "Under a different name, with a background that would not raise questions. I wanted to understand what these places actually are. Not on paper, not in inspection reports. In the small hours, in the daily moments. I wanted to see who shows up and how." He looked at her directly. "Most people treated me as they were required to, professionally, correctly. But you," he paused. "You noticed I wasn't eating. You sat with me when you had other places to be. You brought me food you bought with your own money, and when I asked you why, you acted like it was the most obvious thing in the world." Zola looked down at her hands. She pressed them flat on her knees. "I know about the suspension," he said quietly. "I know what was reported and how. I know what it cost you." She looked up. "I am sorry that happened," he said. "You were punished for doing something genuinely good. That is not something I can make right entirely, but I would like to try." He reached forward and set an envelope on the table between them. She did not reach for it. "What's in that?" she said. "A formal offer," he said. "We are launching a quality assurance and resident advocacy division within our senior care portfolio. We need someone whose instincts about human dignity are correct. Not someone trained to say the right things on paper. Someone who actually sees people." He looked at her steadily. "I would like that person to be you." Zola looked at the envelope. She looked at him. "Mr. O.C.," she said carefully, "I haven't finished my LPN certification. I don't have a degree. I don't know anything about corporate." "I'm not looking for a degree," he said. "I can hire 100 people with degrees. I'm looking for judgment, for character. Those things are much harder to find." He paused. "The role comes with a full salary, health benefits, and a training program we will build around you. We will cover your LPN certification and anything beyond that you choose to pursue. The one thing I cannot give you is more time, so I wanted to reach you before too much of it passed." The room was quiet. Through the window, Zola could see the garden, the roses. "Mr. O.C.," she said, "can I ask you something? Anything. The cardigan."
"Fine," she said.
"The brown one. You wore it almost every day." He looked at her for a moment. Something moved in his face. "My wife gave it to me," he said. "She passed 7 years ago. I wore it because I was still getting used to moving through the world without her." Zola nodded slowly. "The roses in your garden," she said. "Did she have a garden?" He smiled. "Her real one. The same one she had seen before, small and quiet and from somewhere deep." "She did," he said. "This one is mine. I started it after she was gone. It was something to do with my hands." Zola looked at the garden for a moment. Then she reached forward and picked up the envelope. She accepted the offer. It took her 2 weeks to think it through, to ask every practical question, to read every line of the contract with a legal aid attorney, who cost her $45 for an hour of his time, and told her it was legitimate and she would be a fool not to take it. She gave Meadowbrook her 2 weeks' notice. She did it in writing, politely. Director Pauline Marsh received the letter on a Wednesday morning and read it twice, because the letterhead of OC Group International was at the top, and because the resignation was effective 2 weeks from today, and because the letter did not explain anything, which felt to Pauline, in a way she would think about for several days afterward, like its own kind of answer. Denise found out from the charge nurse. She stood at the nurse's station for a moment after hearing it, then picked up her clipboard and kept moving, because there was nothing else to do. Zola's last day was quiet. She went room to room and said goodbye to the resident she had known the longest. Miss Ruth grabbed her hand and held it for a long time, and then said something that didn't quite make sense, but felt warm. Mr. Hendricks told her she was the only one who knew how he liked his blanket. She told him she'd written it in his file. She walked out the side door at the end of her shift and stood for a moment in the parking lot, looking up. It was an ordinary afternoon. Pale sky. Someone's car radio from across the lot. A pigeon investigating something near the dumpster. She drove home. She made herself a real meal, not cereal, a whole pot of chicken and rice that she ate slowly at the table, and she thought about what it meant to have noticed someone. To have decided, on an ordinary evening, that a person sitting alone in a common room looking out a window deserved more than what they were getting. She had not done it for a reward. She had done it because she could not do anything else. She opened her savings app and looked at the number. In 2 days, the first payment from OC Group would come through. The LPN program would start in January. There were rooms in the world she had not yet walked into, and she did not know what most of them looked like. But she had been noticed by someone who was really paying attention, and it turned out that in the end, the way you treat a person when there seems to be nothing in it for you is the truest thing about you. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, the world finds a way to confirm that. She closed the app. She washed her bowl. She went to open the window, because the evening air had turned cool and sweet, the way it does in early autumn, and the rosebush in her front yard, the one she had not watered in weeks, was finally going to get some rain.